Yeah, special thanks to Zara. Zara puts in a hell of a lot of work every single day, every single week to try and make these things successful. Zara, thank you. All right. Thanks for doing all that you do. Zara, is there anything that you want to say before we pass it over to Dave?
Yes, I want to mention something. Thanks, Kevin. So I want to say hi to everyone. Welcome to our 46th session of Agile Gathering. I'm so happy to see you all again, and also warm welcoming to our new attendees. Today we have around 8 new attendees. Okay, all right, let's get started. Dave, I'm so excited to hear from you today. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for the introductions, and good to see you all again. Good to see some familiar faces. Thanks a lot for coming along. This is a bit of a new talk for me. I know I've spoken to a lot of you guys before. I think you know roughly what my style is. It's not ultra polished. It's a little bit heavy metal rock and roll style. So hopefully there'll be some good stuff in here that you can take away and run with, and fingers crossed some good ideas to get you started on an agent journey of your own. So if my slides behave, I should be able to share them now. So let me flash this up. Let me know if this is coming through, please. Here we go. Okay, I think that should be coming through. How does that look? Okay, great. I think it looks good. Excellent. Okay. So this talk's called Agile Agents Starter Pack. There's quite a lot to get through, so I'm going to rip through quite a bit. So if it's too high level or if you've got any questions, please fire away and hopefully I can cover them at the end. Or if you need to send me a message, please do. But this is going to be a little bit of a shot in the arm for agents and applying them in Agile context. So hopefully if you're new to agents, if you've done some experimentations with LLMs and AI, this will be a bit of a step forward. And hopefully it'll show you some good places where you can go to continue your journey. So let's get started. The first couple of bits, a few different questions. So I suppose first question, either thumbs up, thumbs down, come off mute. Would you let an AI agent join your team tomorrow? And the question I'd like you to think about here is, would you be comfortable if there's an AI doing things while you're in bed asleep? Like it's going onto your boards, it's moving tickets around, it's creating documentation, sending stakeholder updates, and you've got no control over that. Is that exciting? Is that worrying? Is it both? And then from there, you would think questions like, what's the biggest risk you've got there? If there's an autonomous piece of software running around doing things and you haven't got direct control over what it's doing or how it's doing them. Also comes with some opportunities. What could be the biggest opportunity? What kind of difference could it make? Could it make your life a lot easier, perhaps? Could it relieve a lot of manual work that you do at the minute? Can you define what an agent is? Does anyone know what an agent is? Could you tell me what the key difference is between an agent from an LLM or a Copilot, for example? If any of these questions you don't have an answer for yet, don't panic. That's largely what we're going to cover in this session. I'm hoping to leave a lot of stuff hanging out in the air that'll help you at least form a bit of an opinion on all these questions. So you might not have a perfect answer, but you'll at least have an idea and you'll know where you want to go next. So this is roughly what the agenda is going to look like. We'll go through some definitions. We'll talk about the 4 building blocks of an AI agent. We'll talk about a lot of different agent patterns, and there's 5 key ones I want to run through. Some Agile use cases, the risks and realities of these agents, and what you can do next to either get stuck in and develop some of your own, or where you can learn a bit more. So can anyone for now, either in the chat or coming off mute, can you tell me what an AI agent is? There's one particular keyword I'm looking for. If anyone can guess it, I'll be very impressed. I'll just bring the chat up so I can see. Okay, well, the keyword or the key differentiator for an agent and between an LLM or a Copilot, you've almost got it there, man, on its own. The keyword we're looking for is autonomous or autonomy or autonomously. In the AI agent, there's a piece of software that can do things autonomously. What that means is it can make its own plans, work out its own plan of attack, reason on its own, and take actions on its own. It doesn't need you to tell it what to do. It doesn't need you to pull a trigger. It doesn't need you to ask it to do anything. All of this it can do on its own, which is incredibly exciting, gives us a lot of different options, a lot of different sort of doors open up to us now in terms of what we can do and how we can leverage these. But also there's a hell of a lot of risk that comes with it as well, and a lot of careful planning that needs to go into this. So What the agent can do that differentiates it from other AI tools that you may have used is it can perceive its environment. It's got tools, sensors, IoT devices even that it can use to figure out what environment it's currently sitting in, what that environment has, what it doesn't have, and what it can leverage within the environment. Based on that, it can make decisions. So it perceives its environment, gets a read on what's around, then it can start to make decisions around how it can do what it wants to do, what's available to it, what's not available. And then ultimately, it can perform tasks. It can do things on its own. It doesn't need us to play prompt ping pong with it. We can give it a job. It can go away, figure out what's around, make some decisions based on that, and then do things, which is really, really powerful, really exciting, really empowering for a lot of us, I would hope. Quick bit on definitions. So I'll just cycle through a quick AI tool pyramid, hopefully give you a bit more flavor to this. At the bottom, we've got LLMs. This will be tools like DeepSeek, Claude, ChatGPT, Mistral. I'm sure all of us have used these in some guys by now. These are really good at predicting text. A step up from that are Copilots. Copilots you'll typically see embedded in software tools more sort of deliberately. And we can think of Copilots in tools like Microsoft GitHub Copilot. We can think of Miro sidekicks. We can think of Figma sidekicks. And Notion has a lot of inbuilt AI tooling that acts as a Copilot as well. These are really good at making suggestions on actions or watching what you're doing, observing, and sort of making quiet nudges to nudge you in the right direction. You can think of these as sort of the expert tutor or the expert coach on the particular tool or the particular piece of software that you're using. At the top of this pyramid, though, we've got agents, and these are a little bit of a cut above. These are some popular frameworks, technologies, tools that you may use to create agents. We've got Make, LangChain, AutoGPT, Crew AI. If you haven't heard of these, don't worry, we'll go into more detail as we go. But the thing that really differentiates the agents from the Copilots and the LLMs is that autonomous action. They don't need to wait for us to tell them what to do. They don't need us to log into a particular tool to give us guidance. These are much more free, much more broad, and much more enabled to act independently. Once we're off and running, we can sort of set them and forget them, which is incredibly useful. And hopefully you'll be able to see some of that value that we can glean from it as we go through this talk. A little bit of a tool table. So I've split this into 4 key categories for LLMs, Copilots, and agents: autonomy, tool use, initiative, and accountability. For LLMs, it's a bit of a wash. They don't really have autonomy. They can use tools in some guys, but a pure LLM can't. They don't have initiative. They rely entirely on us to give them a problem or give them a nudge in the right direction. And we can't really outsource accountability to an LLM. They're notorious for hallucinating. Anyone who's looked at LLMs at a technical level probably understands they're not half as smart as you give them credit for or as you may think they are. So there's very, very little in terms of these 4 key categories that LLMs can really win out on. Copilots are a little bit of a step forward. Autonomy, there can be some, depending on the tool that it's embedded in. For example, in Miro, you can give a Copilot some autonomy to go and do different things within the context of Miro for you. So it can have autonomy in very narrow context, but not explicit autonomy. Tool use, again, as Copilots are generally embedded into an individual tool or technology, they tend to be experts in that particular tool. Can't really go much broader than that. Similarly, for initiative within the context of the tool or technology, they're very useful. Outside of that, it falls down. And ultimately, those limitations, I mean, again, there's a very limited amount of accountability that you can delegate or defer to a Copilot or an LLM. An agent, though, takes a big step forward. In terms of autonomy, yes, autonomous, can do things on their own, don't need us. Tool use, yes, they've got access to a wide variety of tools. Lots of those are API enabled. You can create tools for your tools. You can create tools for your agent to use if you've got a little bit of technical know-how. And your agent can go and dynamically source tools as well. It can look at tool registries and figure out which ones are the best for the job it's being asked to do. So that gives it, again, a lot more power that it can bring to bear in terms of the problems you want it to look at. Initiative, yes, agents have initiative. They don't need to wait for us to sketch out step by step what they need to do. They can form their own plans, reason their way through problems, try different things and learn as they go. And again, accountability. This is a bit of a grey area with agents. There is a level of accountability I think you can delegate, at least theoretically, to an agent. Ultimately, though, if the agent is making decisions on behalf of you, it's acting as an agent for you. I think as an Agilist, as a professional, as a developer, you need to be prepared to accept the responsibility for the actions that the agent takes. And I think in the future, this will be woven into things like organizational codes of conduct, contracts, statements of work. Anything that's produced by an LLM or an AI agent, it won't be a defense to try and outsource the responsibility to them. I think ultimately there still needs to be that human in the loop providing the supervisory layer over what's going on there. So while theoretically I think accountability we could defer to an agent, ultimately I don't think it's in our interest to. And I'm hoping this talk will show you how we can integrate with them a little bit more effectively. So that's a lot of stuff in terms of definitions and setting the scene. And what you might be thinking at this point is, okay, I've heard about agents. They sound pretty cool. How do I make one? How would I get started? What tools can I use to do that? The question is, the answer, is, it all depends on you, your skills, and your experience. So this may seem a little bit overwhelming, but I've created a little bit of a chart of tools that you can use to create AI agents. On the y-axis on the left, we can see accessibility or simplicity of the tool from low to high. And on the bottom, we can see versatility or customizability from low to high. This is a collection of tools that you can use to create agents. I know there's a lot there. Please don't feel overwhelmed, but all I'm trying to do is illustrate here there are tons and tons and tons of options. And based on who you are, what your skills are, what your experience is, and what you want your agents to do, these will all have an effect on the tool that you choose to do the job. So you'll see that there's a bit of a negative correlation here. Generally, the more simple and straightforward a tool is to use, the less versatile and customizable it's going to be. And on the other hand, if you want something truly versatile, truly customizable, truly sort of autonomous to the very core, that's not going to be as simple to learn. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve there. I'm hoping you've seen some of these before. And as I say, this is a bit of an untidy chart, so I'll take it a step further forward. This is how I sort of break this chart down into different zones. So in the top left, we're looking at tools that don't require any really coding or development know-how. These are tools that you can figure out without development skills. Very, very low code or no code tools, things like Zapier and Make, that are very accessible and allow you to get started with some narrowly focused agents to make a start. Really good step in the right direction. In the yellow section, you'll see a little bit more coding knowledge that gives you a little bit more versatility. Tools in there like OpenAI's Agent Kit, LangChain, N8N that you may have heard of. These are all really good. A little bit more of a learning curve to the top left, but still really accessible for most people with no real coding knowledge required. When we get to the orange category, things like Claude Skills, Agent Bricks from Databricks, Crew AI, AutoGen, these are tools that sort of assume a level of technical knowledge or skills will be there. And the reward for that is you can do a hell of a lot more with these tools than what you can with Zapier or Make. And also the cost of these tools for running them, especially in production or in live environments, is a lot lower than outsourcing that to something like Zapier. I'll show you in a slide in a moment a little bit more on that, but ultimately another dimension to consider with this chart is the more accessible and simple some of these tools are, generally the more they're going to cost you to run and use. The exception is the final category that you'll see in the bottom right. AutoGPT, Baby AGI, MemGPT, these are really the bleeding and leading edge of agent tooling. And these are the ones that you'd only really use if you're in the research or cutting edge use case type area. It's very unlikely you're going to need to use these unless you're really, really invested in agents and using them for everything. But these really give you a flavor of where the industry, where the technology, and ultimately where the world's going to be headed off the back of AI-powered tooling. So all different categories for different people, but all of them give you something different. And I think ultimately all of these give you really exciting options for how you can get started with agents in your workflow and in your tools. So you might be thinking, this is a mess. I've got no idea where to start. What do I do? I've got 3 recommendations for a really good place to start. Zapier, Make, and N8N. All of these are what I would call really good gateway drugs into making agents. All of these have a free offering, so you don't need to pay for these tools if you want to use them sort of low touch or in non-live environments. All of them have really good learning platforms and academies, so you can get certifications, badges, upskilled on all of these platforms natively within their own academies, which is really helpful. And I think most importantly of all of these tools now have a really strong online community, whether that's on YouTube, Reddit, within their own forums. All of these tools have really good cult followings that have lots of different users doing lots of different things, and you can learn very, very quickly how to leverage these tools in your own context with other people who are on a similar mission to you. So these give you a really good place to start. They're sort of ranked on a couple of things as well. In terms of complexity, Zapier is by far the easiest, no code at all required, a legion of plugins just sat on the shelf ready for you to use for any tool you can think of. And all of that's fairly straightforward. You can have a variety of agents set up running in the background for you by this afternoon if you wanted to. So truly, truly accessible, truly, truly low investment to get started with agents on Zapier. Make and N8N are slightly more complex. Again, if you wanted to go on there and get some agents out this afternoon, you could. But those tools also give you benefits for things like technical knowledge, coding know-how, experienced AI usage. There's some benefits that are conferred to you on those if you're not truly a novice user. This sort of goes in reverse order, though, for the cost that comes with these tools. All of these tools have a free offering, but if you wanted to use them live in your role in a production environment or regularly with hundreds and hundreds of runs, Zapier is by far the most expensive of these three good places to start. Makes a nice middle ground, and N8N is by far the cheapest, but assumes the most coding knowledge or know-how there. If I had to make one recommendation for a place to start learning agents, you can probably see Make is the really nice middle ground in the middle. So Make is a really good place to learn what agents are, pick up some certifications and badges on how you've built up your know-how around agents and how to embed them in your role. And also a really good free offering that's quite generous for personal use. I think you'd really struggle to exhaust that unless you were really hammering it week in, week out to exhaust that personal use. So Make is my recommendation for a place to start with agents. Okay, so we've done a bit of grounding on agents, what they are, definitions, what the tools look like, what some good places to start could be. We'll go through a little bit more of a breakdown of what agents are and what they're made up of now. For most agents, we've got 4 key building blocks. Does anyone know what they are before I make a start? There's 4 key areas that every agent has. Does anyone know what they are? Instructions is you're sort of on the right track, sort of. You're probably talking about the LLM interface where you talk and guide it. So yeah, good. I'll cycle through, but the first step related to instructions is the LLM. This is the brain of the agent, and this is what allows the agent to have a level of intelligence and communicate with human users. So trained on lots of data, generates human-like language, gives it access to things like knowledge recall, draft and summarization, translation, all sorts of text functions that it can then use to either interface with other tools or do other things. These are really good at pattern recognition and reframing information in context, but ultimately they're not very powerful and they're not very personalizable. These are very general. It doesn't really know you or your team very well out of the box, and it needs some additional layers to go beyond that text prediction and text manipulation level. So we do that in a few different ways. First thing we give it is a reasoning layer. And this is provided in some LLMs now out of the box, which is really nice. But that reasoning layer moves an agent from responding. So instead of playing prompt ping pong with you now, you can give an agent a request and it can think on its own about how to plan those out, how to break big jobs down into smaller jobs, and choose how and when it's going to succeed and complete those jobs for you. So instead of now giving it a question and you get the first answer back, it can do a little bit more deeper thinking. It can use structured approaches like chain of thoughts, plan, do, check, acts, respond and act. And this is a good sort of trade-off decision that you can make when you're creating your agents around, do you want it to be ultra fast or do you want it to be ultra accurate? Based on what you need in your use case, you can tweak your agent to meet the requirements that you have. And reasoning enables you to have conditional workflows. So the agent can learn from its experience. It can try different things. You can give it a few different options to cycle through and see which works the best that it can report back on. So the reasoning layer is the second really big plugin for an agent. Third is memory. And memory, if anyone was around when ChatGPT and the LLMs really popped, memory was the first thing that everyone really wanted. Memory gives us a few really key things. Allows us to store information short term, so we can have work in memory within an individual task or an individual prompt. And long-term memory, which allows us to have full conversation history, learn about user preferences, build up knowledge bases. Both of these give you slightly different things, but both of them are incredibly useful, especially when we can start combining them in tandem. So, for example, doing a task for me to write a social media post will be very different from doing a task for Zara or Kevin to write a social media post. So by combining the request to create a social media post in the short-term memory with long-term memory around things like user preferences, user roles, conversation history, the LLM can quite easily get closer and closer to something more useful, more personalized, and more relevant to the user input. And I often talk about memory as the key for making a closed book exam an open book exam. And if your agent or LLM doesn't have any memory, you're sort of relying on that first pass answer being right. If you can give it memory, build up context, give it knowledge bases to work within, you turn a closed book exam when you ask it a question into an open book exam, and it now has relevant material to refer to, and it can build up its own sense of context around what you want and what's going to be useful to you. As we've touched on, memory supports personalization, critical for multi-step tasks. So if we want to do a chain of thought reasoning, or if we want to do a plan, do, check, act cycle, memory is absolutely essential. And the advanced agentic workflows, especially when we're talking about multi-agent workflows, are sharing memory between agents now. So instead of having a team of people where we may need to communicate daily at a daily Scrum, for example, or have sprint reviews to communicate with stakeholders regularly, in an agentic workflow where we've got multiple agents working together, there's no real need to have those synchronization sessions. They're all pulling from the same well in terms of memory, which makes things a lot simpler for orchestrating agent workflows, but comes with some drawbacks as well that we'll go into later. And the final step for building blocks is probably the most exciting or the most powerful one, is tools and tool usage. The key differentiator between most LLMs and an agent is the use of tools. And tools allow agents to act in the world. If we think of the LLM as the brain of the agent, the tools are the hands and feet. These are really what allow your agent to do things. These can be APIs, scripts, databases, applications, other models, other LLMs. Also, anything that you can think of can ultimately be refactored into a tool of some description. And this is what allows you to have real integration inside your Agile environments. The tools are really the key to you being able to unlock the value of agents and allow your agents to go and do things that are highly relevant to you and your role instead of just a generic one off the shelf. Without tools, an agent's really clever and it can do a lot with text. With tools, agents can really apply their intelligence, and this is what allows them to have actions in the world. And these extend the LLM from that expert tutor or an expert coach into someone who can get out there and do things for you. So this is the really exciting step. And at this point, I'd like us to go through a booster pack of tools, just to go a little bit deeper into tools and what they are. So we've got a pack here that we'll open with a few different tools in there that I want to cycle through. The first type of tools we'll talk about are data tools. These can be existing knowledge bases like Confluence sites, SharePoint folder structures, databases, lots of different data file formats like CSV, PDF, docx, anything at all that you can feed it. We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of APIs for fetching data from different locations and in different formats. And there's a ton now of embedding models that allow you to convert your raw data, your raw files, your raw programs into vector searchable data. And vector searchable data makes it much more efficient for agents to combine different data sources, think at pace, really increases the throughput and power of your agent. So data tools are the first category that it's worth getting familiar with. Secondly, we've got action tools. And these are really what you'll care about as an Agilist. These are the tools that allow your agents not only to think and have ideas about what they could do. Action tools allow them to go into the relevant tools, go into the relevant systems, and do things that you want them to do. So we can think of project tools like Jira, Confluence, Microsoft. I was going to say Microsoft Project, but there's a different one now. Monday.com, ClickUp, all of those project tools you can get an agent to go and make actions for you on. Communications tools, emails, IM, SMS, agents can do all of that. Development tools, I'm sure you've seen lots of software developers using agents like Claude Code, like Microsoft Copilot to help them with development. Calendars, collaboration tools, the list goes on and on and on. And the more action tools you give an agent access to, the more it can dynamically source its own data from those tools, combine them in interesting ways, and play them out again. So there's a bit of a trade-off. The broader the tools that you give an agent access to, the less deep it can go into each of those. But equally, it can do things that you don't expect the more access that you give to it. So a really interesting trade-off that's worth exploring when playing around with agent development. Next tool category are orchestration tools. And this is about sort of the logical flow of your agents, helping it to make effective plans, things that help your agents plan a workflow, work through an agent framework, for example, to understand what getting from start to finish would look like for the task you're asking it to do. Here, one of the key words in agentic development now and in the next year is going to be agent governance, and orchestration tools allow you to apply effective governance to your agents. You can take more control over what they're permitted to do and what they're not permitted to do, and give yourself a lot more security that they're not going to run away and do things that you're not expecting. And pipelines are another big one. Agents in pipelines or pipelines powered by agents are going to be, again, in 2026, probably a really hot trend in the development space. And these all really allow you to build in effective guardrails, effective governance, effective sort of protections around the agents that you create. So not only are they useful, they're going to be safe to scale and safe to use at full power. Final category I want to talk about, and this is sort of a bit of an emerging one as well, is the agent as a tool. So agents can use other agents as tools. And one way I like to sort of categorize or conceptualize agents is agents themselves are going to give non-technical users and anyone who has access to an agentic building platform the opportunity to develop their own autonomous tools. But you can also then develop tools for your tools to make the tools' job easier. And that can become a recursive loop where all the way down you're creating effective, dynamic, really versatile tooling that allows your agents to do more for you in your specific context and the jobs that you specifically care about. And I hope that that's exciting for most of you. I think that this is going to be a real democratization of technical power for non-technical users. And in this, we can think of things like using agentic and multi-agent setup. So expert agent in task 1, passing their output to expert agent in task B, then getting that back when they've got a refined version to work with. We can think of memory agents, especially long-term memory agents who are sort of pre-programmed or preset to have really vast subject matter expertise in specific areas that other agents can go and lean on. Reviewers and judges are excellent for automated testing now. So we can have an agent that's assessing the performance of another agent and then can flag to us when there's a problem or when it's doing something unexpected. Similar to that is panel of experts. So we can have agents reviewed by other reviewer or judge agents that all have a different perspective. So we could have a reviewer or a judge that's a little bit more free-flowing, a little bit more extroverted, a little bit more open to risk than another agent who's more conservative, more risk-averse. And we can get a different sort of plethora of views of how an agent's performing based on the experts that we want to leverage. And the bottom one's another really interesting and exciting one. We can have adversarial relationships between our agents. So we could have an agent that's going to do a job for us and gives us step in its job to two different agents. They'll both do an individual job for it, and it'll come back and it'll pick the winner based on criteria that we give it. So not only are we using agents in a collaborative way, we can also set them up in competitive ways to benchmark and understand which agents are best for the job that we're trying to do. And I think that will become more and more prevalent as non-technical users enter the fray. Having those adversarial competitive setups between different agents to understand what's good at what particular job will be incredibly helpful. Okay, so those are the 4 key building blocks for different agents. That's a little bit theoretical. And what we're going to do now is cycle through the different types of agents that we can create and where you might want to use those in your Agile workflows. So I'm hoping this will give you guys some good sort of idea for use cases and where you could start applying these. 5 different agent types I want to work through. The first one is a very basic reflex agent, and you can think of this as sort of the prompt ping pong agent. It's rules-based. It does sort of an if-then-then trigger. There's no memory, no deeper context, and it's very static and mechanical. That might make it sound bad. The benefits of it, though, are it's really fast and it's really easy to implement. There's not much technical knowledge required to set up a reflex agent and use it effectively. A few different Agile examples. We could use this to auto-close stale tickets in our project tool. We could trigger reminders if no stand-up notes are posted. We could flag an alert if a sprint burn down falls below a specific threshold or a specific throughput number. We can flag overdue dependencies. We can do instant Slack pings on critical build failures. Lots of different use cases, even for a basic reflex agent that isn't super intelligent. And you'll see a lot of these coming up in the tools that you use every day. So, for example, Slack has a reflex agent-like setup around workflows where you can sort of programmatically or agentically now set up agents to do jobs for you in Slack, like put reminders on for when stand-ups are going, ask questions around how projects are going and collate those updates, and then provide a documented output. And if there are any ChatGPT users in the audience, you may recognize this, the GPT store. And this is a really rich sort of library of agentic tooling in the ChatGPT wrapper. And by using the custom GPT search, you can find dozens and dozens and dozens of reflex agents for whatever job you want to do. For example, on the screen in front of me now, we've got DALL-E, which is an image gen reflex agent. We've got a data analyst reflex agent. And anything that you want, there'll be a custom GPT of some description that you can either use to help you out as a reflex, or that you can build on top of to build something more intelligent. So that's the lowest layer we would start with. The step up from there is what's called a model-based reflex agent. These are a little bit more of a step forward. These use what's called an internal state model. Basically what that means, it has an awareness of who it is and the world it's sitting in. This enables it to respond. It doesn't just play prompt ping pong with you now. It can do a little bit more. And it can look at the current conditions, not just the raw triggers. So what that means is it doesn't just consider the prompt that you give it now. It also considers what it has access to, any tools it's got, anything that it knows about you as well. So it's a little bit more intelligent than a reflex agent. And most modern LLMs are probably in this category now. Tools like Claude, ChatGPT, Mistral, they probably sit more firmly in the model-based reflex agent category now. They're a lot smarter than reflex. They can give you a little bit more contextual relevancy, which is good, and that helps to reduce hallucinations and false positives. So that's pretty good. Ultimately, it does remain reactive. It still needs us to give it an input to do something. And it often requires instructions where it's trying to work with multiple different criteria. So really good sort of rubrics around decision-making are useful for tools like this. A few different examples. We could have a model-based agent that's there to detect blockers based on multiple signals. So it could be looking at Jira, looking at Slack, looking at pull requests in ADO, and figuring out what blockers could emerge or what blockers are currently in play based on collating and aggregating those three information sources. It can flag performance anomalies by comparing against historical trends. So it could look at sprint reports and figure out things like, is our overall throughput improving over time? Are we getting worse? And what the reasons behind that could be. It can suggest replanning if work starts to drift. So if it's monitoring Jira tickets and it sees that there's a Jira ticket that's been updated 5 or 6 times within a week, it could raise a flag to say, okay, this ticket's probably changed quite a lot. Do we need to have another look at this and figure out what we do next? And it can highlight high-risk dependencies based on past sprint patterns. So if it sees a pattern emerging again that it's seen before, it could remind a Scrum Master or a team of that and say, we've had a pattern like this before. This is what happened last time. Do we need to sense check and de-risk anywhere here? So this gives you a lot more useful stuff that you can do. The example we're looking at here is a workflow from N8N. And what this is a model-based reflex agent that does a bit of risk analysis. I know this looks overwhelming at first, but don't panic. I'll show you what the big sections are in this. The first section here is we are ingesting a lot of data from Jira, and we're doing a little bit of transformation on that data. So we're pulling all the available tickets in Jira, and then we're looking for any that have dependency update or risk update issues, and then we're extracting those into a different list. So we've got a list of what we think the likely dependency or risk tickets could be. The second step is we perform a bit of AI analysis. So we give all of these tickets to an AI agent, and we ask it to have a look and understand what's changed on these tickets. Is the risk profile increasing or decreasing? And what do we need to do next to improve that? And then the final layer is creating those risk analysis outputs. So based on taking in some data, transforming it, analyzing it with an AI tool, it'll now create a Google Sheet that's full of all that data and give us not only each risk and dependency, a status on how they're performing and what we can do next to improve them or what we need to do in light of any changes. So that can be really helpful as well. Next, we'll go another step up. So after reflex agents and model-based agents, we can go to goal-based agents. These are a real cut above the other two. These we just need to give a job to, and the agent itself will figure out what it needs to do to achieve that goal. It can plan, it can problem solve, and importantly, it can either be the coach instructing you on how to do things, or it can be the coachee and take guidance from you around what it should do and the constraints it should operate within. These are really flexible, these are really adaptive, and these can create really long, elaborate change of tools. But these need really clear goals, they need really clear operating principles, and there's a huge risk of drift with these or overcomplication. And the example I often use is let's imagine we can set up a Terminator-style agent, and we could say something like, please stop all human suffering. The solution an agent could come up with would be, I can stop all human suffering by eliminating all humans. That's probably not what we want. So we need to think about the constraints that we ask it to operate within and the principles we want it to operate with as well. Lots of different examples for this. We can have a sprint planning facilitator or any event facilitator for that matter. Give it a goal of facilitating the event and the outputs we want, and here, presto, the agent will do the rest. We could have a release planner, so looking at the tickets, dependencies, understanding what we need to do for sign-off. We could have a workshop organizer, preparing Miro boards, calendar invites, communications, agendas. And we could have a retrospective co-facilitator, creating boards, logging actions, surfacing any hidden trends. Lots of different ways that we can use these and for really low cognitive effort. What I want to show you is a retrospective builder agent that I've put together in Miro in their Sidekicks feature. So what we'll do is click the purple button on the left to open the Sidekicks dialog. And in this Sidekick, I'm going to ask it, I want to create a retrospective for my team. We've just been through a tough sprint, so we're feeling a bit burnt out. We need something for some catharsis and some new improvements. It would be great if we can add an English Premier League theme based on this session so far. And then we would submit that to the agent to go ahead and do. What the Miro agents are really good at is using existing Miro tools, and especially lots of sticky notes, shapes, templates to make things easier for you. And by asking it for that English Premier League themed retrospective, we've got back a collection of discussion prompts on the left and a collection of images on the right that we can use in our session. So within 30 seconds, you've created a new retrospective template with custom imagery, with custom discussion prompts that you could very easily tailor to your team by giving more context around what the team needs to talk about, the technology you're working on, or the goals that you've got. So these are really helpful, and you'll see more and more of these being embedded in tools like Miro moving forward. Utility-based agents, again, are a bit of a step above goal-based agents. These are ultimately goal-based agents with optionality built in. These can evaluate different options and pick the best one based on the highest utility or the highest score that it's given based on some criteria that we ask it to work with. This allows you to optimize what the agent's going to do, optimize the path it takes across some explicit trade-offs that you instructed on. This is great. It really gives a lot of intelligence to the agent and allows you to balance a lot of factors within the context that you're working in. But again, this requires even better defined utility functions, and it's really, really sensitive to bad scoring logic or changes in the environment. So if your world changes and the overarching strategic goals of your department or team change and you don't tell the agent about that, it's not going to go and it's going to operate on outdated information. So very important to put in the legwork to make sure that these agents are set up for success. But they are incredibly powerful. And we can add things like backlog prioritizers, selectors for release cuts, test strategy analysts, sprint scope optimizers. We're getting beyond sort of the functional, manual, static element of task execution now, and we're getting more into coaching, thinking, and guiding, sort of the stuff that we should be really expert in as Agilists and Scrum professionals. You can train these utility-based agents to help you at that level as well. This is a release planner analyst that comes from make.com. This workflow, again, looks complicated, but it's really not. All it's doing is going to Trello, getting all of the cards that are available in Trello, understanding what position those cards are in, whether they're to do, in progress, done, and then it's giving all of that information to an AI agent at this stage here. And this agent has access to a few different tools. It's got the Anthropic chat model to give it a brain, the LLM element. It has access to different tools, so it can download the sheet that we create with the Trello outputs. It can download project context, so not only does it get the tickets from the Trello board, it can also access relevant files around the project that this team are working on from a SharePoint or a Google Drive location. And it can manipulate the spreadsheet that we've created with the outputs in there around the tickets that we've currently got. And it can use all of those tools in a collaborative way. So it'll use the LLM to read and understand the tools. Based on what it's got access to, it'll build up a context for the project and the team and the tickets that they've been working on. And the output of this ultimately will be a sheet of recommendations on what should go into the next release and the reasons why these are suitable candidates for release, with maybe some relevance to either a sprint goal, a product goal, or a strategic initiative that this team is part of. So I hope you can see how we've gone from sort of a fairly basic reflex agent who can answer a question, play ping pong with you in the prompts, to something that can really now think and reason on its own and make strong recommendations from you based on what it's learned and the things that it's surfacing. So a few different things. This is just some sort of prompt hygiene. I suppose the key things to give it are a role, some core objectives, and an output format. This is the one for this agent in particular. Not as important as the agent itself, but really useful prompt hygiene and good frameworks that you can explore around what makes a good prompt for an agent. Final agent type is a learning agent. These are the most powerful of all, but these come with the most manual workload as well. A learning agent is almost approaching sort of human level cognition. It can learn from feedback, it improves over time, it adapts its policies and behaviors dynamically. It doesn't need us to tell us what the rules are, it can figure them out on its own. And these are very self-sufficient and passive. These are sort of the set it and forget it style agents. These are really strong at evolving over time. So over the long term, these are tremendous. They're strong in complex and recurring domains. So, for example, project deliveries, product development practices. If we're going to do similar but not identical things over time, learning agents can become incredibly powerful. They are hard to unpick, though. The reason for that is this agent's going to do a lot on its own without your input for a long time. And when you come back to it to ask questions to try and glean some value, it can be hard to unpick why it's made decisions it's made or what information it's used to get the reasoning that it's come to. These are all harder to monitor, but in the future, I think especially in consultancy environments, every project or product development initiative will have its own learning agent deployed alongside the development team. And as time goes on, this agent will become a subject matter expert in that specific project or that specific initiative that then either stakeholders, team members, anyone involved around the project itself can then talk to, instead of having to talk to a team member directly, for example, that could get quick, highly relevant, highly engaging material from a learning agent and make suggestions to the team based on what it learns over time. Really impressive, really exciting stuff. The example that I'll go through for this one is similar to the one that we've got in here. So the retrospective insight engine, we could have a learning agent that looks at every retrospective that's been done in an organization ever, compares that to the retrospectives that your particular team is doing, and then it can make recommendations on what it's learned across the board, any traps it sees you falling into. And it can also take any good practices that you're doing and relay that back to the wider group where needed. Lots of other examples on that, but we're getting a little bit pressed for time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. The example I've got on this one is a video learner, and this agent will be able to glean insights from any video that you've got. So let's imagine we've joined a new project and we've been recording every session that we've done, every daily Scrum, every sprint review, every retrospective, every one-to-one, every stakeholder interview. All of those are recorded and they are available in a tool like SharePoint or on Confluence. What this agent can do is go and download all of those videos, analyze them with AI, maybe creates a transcript of those and then analyzes that for sentiment or any sort of learnings that it can create. And then what it can do is, based on the analysis that it's done, provide a report weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that would be, to a specific stakeholder and say, this project looks like it's in good shape based on the review I've done of all of this material. And these are the trends since my last review, for example. So while this does take a little while to get up and running, once you've got some data for it to work on and it can start using that data to learn from its own experience and make recommendations, I think this will become sort of a par for the course tool for anyone working in a delivery role. And I think ultimately, for us working in delivery roles, we'll just be expected to be able to use these tools to improve project and product performance. So again, really exciting, and I think gives a lot of options to us in the future for what we can do and how we can develop our skills with agentic AI. So those are the 5 different agent types. going from simplest to most complex. The really interesting thing, though, is when we start to combine these. Kevin, I can see that you've got your hand up, sorry. And you're on mute. It all seems to be good. Okay.
Sorry, Dave. We are in a limit of time. We have 9 minutes.
Yeah, I'll race through. Yeah.
Okay.
So the really interesting stuff is when we start combining these. So different sorts of patterns emerge for how you can combine these and how they can work. We can have lots of different multi-agent patterns. We can have a planner, executor, reviewer. So an agent that plans, an agent that executes, and an agent that reviews, a very linear sort of flow. We can have an orchestrator, worker, synthesizer layer, where we've got one orchestrator that gives specific jobs to specific agents, and then a synthesizer that pulls all that together at the end. We can have a parallel vote. This is more of the adversarial stuff, or the utility-based agent, where we give the same job to different agents with different tools and different LLMs, for example. And then a coordinator agent at the end selects the best one based on whatever we think the criteria should be for best. We can have role-playing agents. And I think these will be really interesting for doing project simulations or trying to identify early risks on projects. We could create the team that we intend to execute on a project scope, for example. And in here, you'll see a very typical Scrum team of agents. And we could sort of create a competitive analysis between this team and another team with, say, 5 developers and another team with 10 developers, and see which performs the best in that simulation with agentic power at its disposal. Again, an interesting sort of application of multi-agent. And the final one is chain of agents. This is a sort of step-by-step chain of agents for doing a sequential flow for publishing some kind of article or post, for example. We could have a data fetch, analysis, visualizer, draft, review, publish agent at every step. And this gives you a highly specialized agent for a highly specialized task, and ultimately should give you a big jump in quality in terms of what you can do with your agents and the workflows that you can set up. Lots of different risks and realities. The key one I want to talk about is the difference between an automation and an agent. An automation is sort of the par for the course way that we've automated tasks previously and doesn't rely on agentic AI. And in some ways, it's probably superior and probably what most people want. The strengths of an automation are it's predictable, auditable, cheap and lightweight, really, really low governance burden. We can really set these and forget these at every level. But they're very brittle. They don't respond well to context and they're not creative. So if you just want something that's going to run and do exactly what you want to do at every step, you probably don't need an agentic workflow for that, and automation will do the job for you. The reason you would consider using an agent is you want something that's more adaptive, something that can plan on its own, something with access to a lot of different tools, has its own memory, solves problem its own way, and can scale quite widely. The limits of the risks here, though, are plentiful. We've got autonomy creep, where it starts to do more than what it's intended to do. We've got memory drift, where old or incorrect information can bias the agent, and we can see there's a lot in hallucinations that we've seen on LLM-powered tooling. Cost and latency, these really can rack up costs quickly if they're left to run, especially on cloud infrastructure. And human trust erosion. If these make mistakes enough, eventually people will stop trusting them, and you may run into issues getting people to engage with these in a meaningful way. The question is always who wins between an automation and an agent. Like a true agilist, the answer here is probably it depends. It depends on the job that you want it to do, and it depends on the sort of latitude that you want to give to the solution to make its own decisions, or if you know exactly what you want it to do at every single step. Okay, so lots of different risks and realities. I'll not run through all of those now, but the biggest risk of all that I want to comment on is ultimately us, that human factor that we just teased at there. The risk of overtrust is fairly prevalent, and you'll have seen this very early in the AI wave where people just trust the AI outputs blindly. They don't really give it a sort of supervisory layer. They don't come at it with a critical eye. They just trust it implicitly, which is clearly the wrong thing to do. But equally, there's a risk of undertrust where the agent underperforms, makes mistakes, and then people disengage entirely and stop using it. I think there's a place for a healthy middle ground here where we use this tool in a similar way that we would use junior colleagues or new joiners to the industry. We'll give them a level of trust and responsibility, but ultimately we still assume responsibility for what they create and the outputs that they produce. Okay, final couple of things so we're getting right to the end. You might be thinking, this all sounds great. How can I get started? I think the best place to start is in a retrospective. Think about a chore that you hate doing, a low-risk task, a light-touch task, and set an agent up to try that. Run it, and in the next retrospective, report back on how that's gone. Then you can make a decision on what you do next. If you're looking for a template to help you plan that experiment, I've got one here for you in Miroverse. This will help you to plan your first AI experiments, think about the problem you want to solve, the conditions you wanted to work within. You might be thinking, I knew where to get some agent templates to start. There are tons of places. There's the AY N8N workflow library, the N8N library, make.com, Hugging Face, GPT itself. All of these have really good places for you to go and get agents off the shelf and bring them into your team. If you want to get learning more, again, I've got some more for you. There are lots of agent learning plans on my link tree. Please check that out at the end. I've got a link at the end. And to wrap up, all I would say in terms of wrapping up and getting started, different types of agents are going to fit different needs, but start as small as you can and as low risk as you can. Prototype as safely as you can. Give it very, very limited scope to start with and build iteratively, just like we do in a Scrum implementation or an Agile implementation. The final line here is probably the important one for me. Think of them as a little bit of very similar to an intern or a grad. They can be very useful, but they're probably not trustworthy yet. But tomorrow, they could become better and better if you're prepared to put the legwork in with them. I think that's it. Sorry, I've made a bit of a race to the end at the end there. I've got a link to all the resources that I've talked about in my talk there. If there's any questions you've got, please fire away. But Kevin, Zara, I'll hand back to you guys because I'm aware I'm probably right on the limit of your time for this one.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching and listening to another episode of the Nice Agile podcast. We hope that you found it helpful. Please like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and please find us on LinkedIn. Send us a message. If you have a friend, if you know somebody who's looking for their next Agile role, they're struggling, please send them our way because we built this community to help support people. Okay, thanks everybody.